Greetings, everyone, and welcome to TRG 30. I am Jill Robinson, CEO of TRG, and I am pleased to welcome you this now every other week to this conversation about bold change for our sector's resilience. And resilience certainly is the name of the conversational game today, as I introduce soon our guest, Dr. Michael Maddaus, my friend, and our resiliency expert. Today, we're going to be talking about operating systems, leadership operating systems, personal operating systems, but all of you in this room, this collective virtual room, lead something. You lead a project, you lead a team, you lead a staff or a board. And as a leader, in the 21st century, and in the current era, the beginning of a third millennium, our sector requires new practices of operating personally within our organizations and for our sector's creative resiliency. As always, there are going to be things I want you focused on, perhaps listening for, but first, this is an opportunity. It's a purposeful one that you've chosen to participate in. And I want to invite you to stop. Put the pencils down, put the phones down, listen and reflect on your own personal operating system. Do you have one? Could you describe it? And if you can, do you know if it's helping you as a leader in how you show up with teams, within your staffs and at meetings, within your communities and your families, much more to pick up on here. And finally, action. Pick a couple, 3 things today that you can either start or build on if you've got a personal practice. And as we'll talk about with Dr. Maddaus, you can always begin again. If you hear things that you've stopped and you think, oh, darn it, just make a decision to begin again. We always have that choice. So let's get to it. Personal resiliency, we're going to be talking about that today. Personal resiliency that connects directly to organizational resiliency, that connects directly to our sector's resiliency. And that, y'all, is the name of the game. Because I think you do too, that as we head into the 21st century, creative organizations, creative leaders like you, and all of you are, you're not assembling widgets, you are creative leaders and workers. Our sector's ability to shine bright as we head into this 21st century and lead new ways of engaging our communities and working, that is our responsibility, because our working in this sector is a privilege that a lot of people don't have, even though sometimes I know that privilege feels like a big fat challenge. So really, I'm talking about this, right? Putting our oxygen mask on first, focusing on ourselves first. No, this is not a book I have read, but it is on my list. I just like the visual and the metaphor. We do have to start with us, and here's why. If we start with us and give some time and attention to the practices that we need to create, the operating system that we need to have, then we can look at the people on our teams, in our families, in our communities with a different kind of empathy. If we need these things, then, well, guess what? It's probable that the people on our work teams need the same. So that's what we're going to be talking about today with Dr. Michael Maddaus. Michael, you have been with us during TRG 30 a year ago. I want to welcome you back again. You're my friend and have become a colleague as we together have been working and talking with a group of 15 international CEOs in arts and culture, our convened cohort, about the concept of resiliency. I'm going to keep us on share for just 1 second and say to everybody in the virtual room, you're here so you, prior to today, got access to the TRG 30 that was back in October of 2020, almost to a day a year ago, and also to Dr. Maddaus's Resilience Bank Account white paper that caught our attention. It's the reason why you joined us in October of 2020. Welcome to you. I'm so glad to have you here with us today.
It's a delight and truly an honor, big time.
Well, at the honors ours, as we've said before, but let's go back to October of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
October of 2020, we were freaked out and exhausted.
Yes.
The stress of the pandemic was acute and such an enormous paradigm shift for us personally and professionally, that the stress was up here, and we were also afraid of the winter that was coming. We knew that it was going to be a hard time of real stoppages and slowdowns and increases in infection rates and all the rest.
The uncertainty was nearly crippling.
Yes, exactly, which is why we brought you in at that time to say, okay, we really need to be talking about resiliency. We need to be talking about resiliency. And you and I began talking and reviewing some of the elements of the Resilience Bank Account white paper. I'm going to get to that in a second, but now it's a year later. And the stress is different. My observation is that it's a long haul stress, that the realization that the pandemic is less an event and more of a generational shift. It wasn't just a pandemic, it was also the realization that crisis creates about a variety of things that we value or don't, and our relationship with each other, our relationship with our environment, our relationship with work. Lots of those things are changing.
That's for sure.
And so you and I, you today are a speaker and a coach and a consultant, a retired thoracic surgeon. I encourage all of you to go back and either visit Michael's website or go back and watch TRG 30 to hear your really interesting and provocative and laden with great experiences, some very tough story. But we both can see in our separate practices the impact of this shift. And you and I have spent time talking about these keystone habits that you describe in the Resilience Bank Account white paper and now teach on. And there are 9 of them. I've organized them in my head since we began talking about them this way. The first 2 relate to our relationship to time, our choices about it, which are myriad, and our impact. The second kind of middle group, sleep and nutrition and exercise, are about our physical capacity and ability to withstand. And then the last group, we spent some time talking about in October, before I fully understood the potential impact myself totally, but they're more spiritual in orientation, but science in backing. There's an absolute connection to them and to leadership capacity. So I'm going to leave these up for a second just so that people can absorb them. You all might want to take a photo. You'll get this deck, of course, but just in case you want ready reference. Keystone. That's a word you use. Why do you use the word keystone? And just talk a little bit about these habits and their impact on leadership. Why do they matter?
Yeah. Well, I think first, as a small preamble to describing what a keystone habit is, it's useful to understand where did I come up with these things and why, right? And so, as people may know in the past, I went to Hazelden for prescription narcotic addiction, and of course, the paradigm that they inculcate you with in that rehab program is a 12-step program. And the one thing I knew for sure is that my personal operating system served me extremely well in terms of success in my career, but it failed me in other ways that allowed me to land in Hazelnut, which was a shock to me because everything had led to success, and then all of a sudden it was no longer working. And so I tried real hard to adopt the 12-step program, but it just didn't work for me. And the reason it didn't work for me, and this is in no way criticism of it, because it does work for a lot of people and it's fantastic. But for me, it was a matter of, there was no kind of science basis to it. There's a 50-50 chance that you'll relapse. And in the meetings, people were kind of talking about the same old sort of tired things without any evidence base to it. Now contextualize that against my role as a surgeon. As a surgeon, there's the Picasso quote, what is it? I'll probably screw it up here, but learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. Okay. Mm. And I love that quote because it really does typify even development of a surgical procedure or mastery of it. And what separates a surgeon who's very good versus a master surgeon. Okay. And a surgeon who's very good, he knows all the steps, or she, they know all the steps and stuff, but they don't really master it to the point, and they can't take it above and beyond. All right. And so for me, the process in anything I do is to master what I know are the best scientific based principles. Okay. And learn it and rigorously learn it, and then adopt it and integrate it into my own personality and my way of looking at the world. But with that as a bedrock for my creativity to develop myself and potentially my leadership skills. So that's been my approach to everything. And that's how I approach this stuff, because the 12-step program wasn't really working for me. So I dug deep, and I had to shatter a lot of my deeply held incorrect notions and biases about a lot of these habits, like self-compassion, nutrition, and the like. I mean, I had really strong opinions about that stuff, and they were just completely wrong. Just absolutely wrong. So anyway, with that as a backdrop, a keystone habit, the keystone is that stone in an arch, archway. And that's the thing that holds the arch open. That's where the pressure, it makes it, it holds the entire arch together. And a keystone habit is one, unlike me going up into the kitchen making coffee in the morning, which I can do blind. The only thing that yields for me is a cup of coffee. But keystone habits influence everything around you, people, your entire world. So sleep, if you have good sleep habits, you're in a better mood, you're more creative. And of course, this flows into all aspects of your life, your relationships, your work, and the like. Now, nutrition, you may say, people may think, well, gosh, what's that? Well, if you gain weight, okay, maybe I just need to lose weight. They tend to view it as just a weight issue. But in fact, even subtle things like eating the wrong kinds of fats, and these things make the brain cells stiff, the membranes of the brain cells stiff. And that may not sound like a big deal, but this influences the neurologic functioning of your brain. And over time, that's a big deal. And so these things are very important. Processed food is a critical thing, and it has a massive impact on your overall ability to think and do things. And of course, again, that influences everyone around you. So this is true throughout all of these habits. They're keystone habits that have huge impacts on the world around you. And just to kind of break it down, I actually want to reframe or retitle the say no so you can say yes to time as a spiritual practice, time management, spiritual practice. And I just decided that seeing it sitting there. And I got that quote from a blog by Cal Newport. And then, as you said, the dopamine projects, doing the things that bring real meaning to our lives. What's your why, the Simon Sinek why in your life? And then the three of managing your personal health, mental health, and physical health through the nutrition, diet, exercise, and sleep. And then the last four, meditation, self-compassion, gratitude, and connection with others. I think of those as my mental operating team, my mental operating room team. because they dramatically impact how I see the world, how I see people, how I interact with people. And those are the habits that really push me to live mentally above the line to be my best self.
We're going to come back to this above
Yeah.
the line
Yeah.
statement, Michael. If you haven't read the Resilience Bank Account paper, do, because Michael, you apply it to the surgical realm. And I have said to you before, people in arts and culture cut their teeth on boards who are the best and the brightest, always in their local communities. They do creative, intense work. They're pretty sharp people.
Yeah, right.
Surgeons are definitely that. And in the paper, you connect these behaviors to science, to leadership capacity. And so I want everyone to just make that connection about the reason why you might take the time to read this paper. It was funny to me though, when we were talking, at one point you said, I had a bias about arts leaders, that they would already know some of these things, already have some of these traits, especially around self-compassion and gratitude. And these are very human, I find. Do you? These are very human. It's very human to not necessarily think about self-compassion as something that would help you be a better leader, as a for instance.
Right. Well, these, it just in surgery, and I'm going to swear a little bit. I guess I won't swear completely, but one of the phrases that I used to teach all the residents, that assumptions are the mother of all F-ups, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that's true in every walk in life. And I've learned, the hard way, and many times, that be curious, be very open-minded about things.
Yeah.
For me, like self-compassion, that was just, whoa, what are you talking about? I mean,
right.
I never even heard of it until I just stumbled across it.
Well, in the white paper, it says a couple of things that I wanted to bring to our attention. A word about empathy versus compassion. Empathy is the process of resonating with another's emotional state, whatever it is. And compassion is a feeling of concern for another's suffering, combined with a desire to help. And it's an antidote and preventative for empathetic distress. There's a lot here, but the point is that a misconception about self-compassion is that it will lead one to be soft, by stealing the harsh internal critic thought process that's necessary to improve or
Seemingly
change.
necessary. Yeah. Seemingly.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Seemingly necessary. Just the opposite occurs. Like gratitude, it is a powerful leadership skill. So there's this amalgam of 9 things, and you've said it's Keystone, and you were getting serious about them. I began to trip to this. We had this conversation back in October of 2020, and I had been through a lot and have an exercise practice and a spiritual practice, and you introduced these other things and the science behind them. And then the pandemic continues, and I'm seeing the need for my own firm and the field to start behaving in 21st century ways, and to acknowledge and recognize that the way that we will thrive moving forward by necessity must be different than the tools and techniques we used prior. I began to get curious about that. And in conversation with you, you described, so does this book that we both have been preoccupied by, 4,000 Weeks. My friend Tim Shields introduced this to me, and we both, Michael and I, recommend it to you entirely. 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. He used to write a column in The Guardian in the UK about time management. And it's a wonderful read. He talks about it differently, but you both talk about this toggle between the future system of thinking, yes, attention on the future, mindfulness on the future, action oriented in the future, and the here and now system, where we're attentive to and mindful about the here and now. Can you just talk about why that matters as part of a personal operating system, and how some of these things help us do that?
Yeah, it's a crucial crucial concept, and the forces of the external environment are so overwhelming, and that is the pressures by email, the pace of life, all that just drives us to think we need to be busy and moving constantly, and that can be just become so built into everything that we do that we never slow down enough to really reflect or connect with people. That's a real problem, and that's a problem at home and at work. And I certainly lived that way in the past. And one of the reasons I retired from surgery is that I just didn't want to do that anymore. I was so sick of it, and I was afraid of going back into that milieu because of the academic world, and I was afraid of myself, frankly, at the time. And the thing is, to be able to toggle and actually slow down. The here and now system is one of everything that's right in front of you, things that are right in front of you, the ability to be present and connect with what is right in front of you, whether that's another human being, a good meal, on a walk, petting your dog, making love, all these things, to actually be present and not just another sort of task. And of course, that takes practice. And meditation is the keystone habit in this arena for me. It really taught me how to sit with my discomfort of sitting and and dealing with my mind and all that. And so that's a crucial skill. And okay, so why is that important? Well, at home, if you want to have a real connection with your significant other or your children, that's what's required. Living a transactional relationship in life with people at home, I guarantee it leads to emptiness.
Yeah.
And that's the world that my wife and I used to live in.
Yeah.
And the same is true at work. And that's what I mean about the environment. You're being pushed to accomplish and drive and pound. But unless you take that time to toggle and actually connect with your people, see them as human beings, relish their accomplishments, feel grateful for what they do, the same dysphoria will exist at home. It just is a fact of life, because we are all human and because we have this deep need to be seen and heard and felt.
So someone asked Michael, let me just ask the question. Why do you suppose these concepts are so very hard for arts leaders? We feel best when we're over busy, over committed. We thrive on a mindset that says, but I have to be there. I have to do this. I have to help out. I can do this. And what's the core issue and driver of these beliefs? And I would say that what I've learned from Michael is that this is not just arts leaders, although nonprofit administrators, I think, do get caught in we're here for a mission, we're here for good. And the result is that we squeeze out and do not perform at our best. Creative resiliency is a thing. So when Michael, you read this, you referenced Cal Newport as time management as a spiritual practice. The notion that we might actually protect some time for component parts of this operating system is part of it, isn't it?
Yes, it's absolutely crucial. You've got to make the time. And I'm just almost done with a book by Cal Newport that I wasn't sure at first if I was interested in it, but it's A World Without Email or something like that. I think the title is. Wow. I mean, that's all I can tell you. Wow. And you'll see the pernicious impact that emails had on this kind of culture you're describing, of going constantly, hive mind. But the other element of this is, and I can just reflect on my career. I can't speak to the careers that you're talking about in the arts world, but I think there's patterns here. The pattern, it's what Marshall Goldsmith refers to as what got you here won't get you there. And what got me to my place in academic thoracic surgery was like intense commitment, driving, pushing. But then when you flip into the leadership realm, that's not going to get you there. You know, then it's about other people, recognition, connecting, because what you're doing is building a team, and a team that feels good together, you know, they feel like they're valued. That's where the magic happens. And the team can be at home or it can be at work. To me, I don't really see any distinction between those two.
Right.
One boulder, two boulders, one is the boulder at work, the other one's the boulder at home. They both require the same kind of attention. I had to view myself as a leader at home. I was going to take the ball and start leading at home with these new practices and with these new mindsets. And it was magical.
Yeah, this concept that Stephen Covey made famous about putting the boulders in first and then the rocks and then the pebbles. Today, what is true is that we all have too damn many boulders to choose from. And so a critical shift is about saying, it's not about putting the distractions aside. It's in fact about choosing the most important boulders as a whole person, which is what you just brought in. I'm a wife, a mother, a sister, a CEO, a business owner, a community volunteer, and my values make all of the, you know, there's a combination of those things that matter. So the personal operating system has to imagine the whole thing. Bradley asked, look, you're framing this in the context not just of a recovery from a pandemic, but as a long haul resiliency, new way of working. Is anybody making these shifts? We're trying to, and Carrie Mizropoff, our Chief Talent Officer, and I are doing this work. What do we need? Others of us too. And if you do the work yourself, so Michael, I want to move to this looking at the clock here. If you do the work yourself, really, truly, like start there, then you have no choice but to go, aha, well, shoot, I need that. I'll bet I have team members who need something like that. Michael, describe what this is. This, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, one other little thing I wanted to note, and I remember battling this too when I started meditating and doing these things. In the moment, you know, when you do these things, it doesn't feel like there's a reward in a sense, you know, like answering email. I mean, okay, I got that done. That feels kind of good, you know, but you know, or going to the gym, there's a sort of a sense, okay, I did that. It's a very clear, yes, before and after moment. But with meditation and that, you know, that always seems like something you can just kind of get rid of or put by the wayside for that day or whatever. But the fact is, over time, it adds up dramatically. And so these things have a really profound effect over the course of a year or two of commitment to them.
I want to interject here real quickly. I see where we're at. Michael and I are going to continue to have this conversation for a few more moments. So just know that we're going to allow this to continue for another 5 or 7. If you would like to stay, please do. This is an important conversation to have. So Michael, sorry for the interruption, but this is an exercise you do. Cue it up and describe what it is and its impact, because you all can do it yourselves.
Yeah, so the idea is that these habits of the resilience bank account are in fact the way to live above the line. You know, use your time to get above the line, and above the line, if you know, it's intuitive. Every one of us, for you know, the problem with the whole wellness and all these things is so scattered all over. And what's the sort of end result that you're striving for? Well, it's one thing if you're running a marathon or you're training for something, you know, that's very clear, you know, end result. But states of mind and how you show up in the world, you know, that's kind of fuzzy. And so I struggled for a long time to kind of articulate this. And, you know, for me, initially it was like, well, I'm more content instead of striving for happiness and all that. But then I realized I landed on this above the line concept, and it's something that we all understand. What are we like when we're above the line? You know, it's like we're on top of the world, right? You know, it's just for whatever that means to you in your own individual sphere. Everyone knows when they're kind of at their best, and so in groups I've had people tell me words in your own words, your own experience. What does it mean when you're above the line in your life? And these are the words that people come up with routinely. And what do you like when you're below the line? Your worst self. And of course, there's gradations on this, but these are the kinds of things that come up, you know, when people talk about this. And It's very uniform. And so for me, and I've found for a lot of others, this idea of really being aware, number one, aware of when you are above and below the line, and what do you need to do to remedy that. Okay, that's the key thing, is to be aware and understand that there are ways of inculcating these habits into your life that will damn near guarantee that you will be above the line much more often than below the line. None of this is perfect. I'm still a struggling human being, right? I mean, there are bad days, there are days when I get triggered by things, but boy, I can come up above the line a lot faster, and I live there much more than I ever have in my entire life.
So we did this exercise with our group of convene executives, and I did it myself. So I would just invite all of you, after this is done or at a quiet moment, to do this exercise yourself. It takes 10, 15 minutes. And my words weren't exactly these words. You know yourself. And I did them, and I talked about them with a colleague. We talked about them in the context of the group. Michael, you've observed there's power in groups that grow to trust each other over time, where what happens in a place stays in a place. So if you have access to that kind of group where this kind of conversation can happen, it's incredibly reinforcing. But in doing this exercise, what it helped me ask myself, and what I ask all of you in this room who've stayed, is, if this was your data, what are you prepared to do differently for yourself first, so that to your family, to your staff, with your board, in your community volunteer work, whatever those big rocks are for you, you show up above the line. And I have recently seen myself below the line. And this, having done this, helped me go, whoa, wait. And I have tripped to the need for the way that I orient my personal operating system today, that has started to adopt some of these practices that we've heard Dr. Maddaus talk about. And here's the thing. If you do this focus on yourself for the next 3-6 months, you will begin to see that the people you work with also need this. They also need personal operating systems. And our work structures for the 21st century require a different kind of structure. Maybe last question, Michael, and then I am going to have to let everyone go, although many of you stuck with us, and I think it reflects the sense of urgency about the topic. Have you seen organizations? Have you seen yet any organizational or team adaptation of a new working paradigm, a new operating system, as a result of your work? You've been working with surgeons for some time.
It's very difficult. No, I have not. Yours may be one of the first that I've really experienced because of your commitment to it, because it takes a leader to be committed to this. And, one of the surgeons I'm working with now, a very prominent cardiac surgeon in the world, but he reached out because he's struggling. He's on a treadmill, and he's very execution oriented. I mean, he's a cardiac surgeon, he's pounding, and every minute is accounted for. And I talked to him about showing gratitude and his team and stuff, and he'd never done that. And this is just a tiny vignette, but he told one of his perfusionists, because I had talked to him about this, he said after a case, and he felt the kind of choking in his throat as he started to try and say it. Boy, you really did a great job. Okay. And that day, that afternoon, the perfusionist is texting him with updates about the patient and anything else I can do to help you, all this stuff. She had never texted him before. All right. So the magic of that tiny bit of gratitude to that woman shifted her entire sense of the relationship. This is the power of these things. And I just absolutely know it categorically how critical it is. The problem is people can conflate that with weakness, and that's not the case. You still have high standards for excellence and execution. All right.
Yeah. You, Alan Mullally, as a CEO that you've highlighted to me. There are others. The guy who runs Nike right now, who makes a morning practice You can read an article about him. We'll send it to you from the Wall Street Journal about his morning practice that is spiritual, mental, and physical, and sets him up for a day of being able to be the kind of leader that Michael's describing. I know many of you, as we wrap up here, have a question about how. And the how depends on each person. My practice is morning with the integration of exercise in an afternoon that I have learned that I must have. And it's also the increasing awareness that my time has to give me recovery time. And if I don't get the recovery time, and if my team members don't get their specific, and everybody's different, needed recovery time, then we won't be the most creatively resilient organization that we can be. And that's our job. That's our privilege. That's our 21st century challenge as we exit this crisis and move to recovery. So I see that I see the point about crisis. And I know that there's questions about how we do this in the context of crisis. Dr. Maddaus and I are thinking about this as we think about 2022 and beyond. And I would just, as I wrap up, remind you that this is what we're here for at TRG, to help be listening to the things that matter most to our sector's creative resiliency, because we have an obligation to be the best and most resilient we can be for our communities. And that means change. Change in how we operate as leaders, change in how we organize the way that people work so that they can be their best. 20th century systems are outdated. It's past. So we have to think differently. So Dr. Maddaus has left us just visually, but I know he's still there. And thank you so much for this time, for our ongoing friendship and work together. Stephen, always, for your help in facilitating these important conversations. I'm going to be hosting another 3 or 4 of them in between now and the first quarter of 2022. I invite you to look out for those and all the things that we talk about here on TRG 30. You all have great evenings, afternoons, mornings, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on TRG 30.